Kichikuou Rance is the 6th game of the Rance series, but the second game that's actually good. I would categorize a majority of the earlier Rance games as really bad. Now the problem with making bad games for any company is that they don't really sell well. And when this happens, a funny little thing known as bankruptcy is a very real possibility. In light of this, developers at AliceSoft just kind of figured, screw it, let's jam-pack everything that we have planned for the series into this last game. Now I'm going to be perfectly honest, I don't know if the story is real. My only source is a fandom page that has comments written by people who could legally classify as a vegetable if their IQ was tested. But this story explains why the game turned out the way it did, so I'll believe it. The game is shockingly open-ended. Earlier games had points A and B, and getting to these points were steps that weren't really fun. In Kichikuou Rance, getting between these points is filled with so many options that you forget the points even exist. Have you ever wanted to fight the living embodiment of Satan? Well, you can do that.
Why does Satan look like the character select screen from Virtual Fighter? What the fuck happened?
Are the poor people getting a little too upset with their living situation? You can encourage them to look at things in a different way. Point being is that the variety of how you approach your playthrough makes choices have impact, and it's probably the reason why they copied this gameplay mechanic twice in later games. The game can be divided into what I consider to be 3 phases: the tutorial phase, the conquest phase, and the monster realm phase. There is technically a 4th phase that is required to get the true ending, but this phase is more of an epilogue than an actual gameplay phase. Just note that to unlock it, it involves stealing a gold tree statue from a gay elderly man's prison wallet. The other steps are slightly less questionable. The tutorial phase is a phase that doesn't teach you shit about the game. Despite tutorials usually leading the player into basic gameplay mechanics, this game doesn't do that. There are only 2 instances of dialogue that teach you about game mechanics, and one of these mechanics is worthless. If you ever have the sudden urge to press this button, consider therapy. The real tutorial of the game is spent on the guides. Now, I may have insulted the community of this game, I kinda have to with some of the comments I see, but I would not have gotten past the first battle if it wasn't for these guides. All in all, what you need to learn about this phase is that you can conquer 1 place per turn, as well as interact with one of your towns. Any opposing factions that you've declared war on will also have a phase where they can attack. You can also do other actions, such as making a building, interacting with your subordinates, and going to your harem. Oh yeah. I didn't mention this earlier, but this game is what is known as an eroge, meaning that I can't show you about 1/4 of my footage on account of it being suggestive. The next phase of the game is by far the largest, and it's the conquest phase. The main objective of this phase is to conquer the continent. The way how you go about this is all up to you, but most people start with free cities. Free cities are a collection of independent towns that have the advantage of having no workers' union to connect them, meaning that if I decide to declare war on one of the towns, the locals just kind of watch. The main thing you want to pick up from free cities is that you can approach a problem in different ways. Sometimes diplomacy is better than declaring war on the civilians. Other times it is not. About halfway through conquering the lower income states, I decided to conquer Shangri-La. The main reason I did this is because not doing this is turning on hard mode. After conquering most of the free cities, I moved on to the country of Japan. The country of Japan is surprisingly one of the easiest places to conquer. Despite the fact that the Weeb nation has some of the most feared warriors who have fought for over a century, they are extremely weak to magic and guns, both of which my army has a surplus supply of. The only problem with conquering them is the historical figure Oda Nobunaga, who rules the country alongside his evil monkey Tokichi, that guy. His weakness is rock golems, of which my army only has 2 of. As I mentioned earlier, any unified faction that you declare war on will have their own attack phase, and the Weeb Nation is by far the worst. They will bring assassins, which are one of the stupidest gaming mechanics in this game. The Weeb Ranger fucking Giga Chad will perform actions that range from doing nothing at all.
Gekko dropped the bucket he was holding to the floor. Gekko covered the castle's halls in manure. What the fuck does that accomplish?
And ending the entire game. You can do nothing to prevent them from acting. You just have to pray and hope that they don't steal half your nation's GDP and instead spread poop all over the walls. After conquering the rest of the poor people, I decided to move on to the north. Helmand is the northernmost country in the game, and like many other northern countries, they take pride in their military. Helmand has by far the largest military infrastructure in the game, but they also have the most amount of disorganization. This army right here decided to attack with their archers on the front line. They did not last very long. The main tactic you want to use in this area is a quick strike force that can take territories whilst a beefy defense force to protect against the onslaught of Russians. There are about 6 or so armies that you have to fight, but each of them use the same strategy of overwhelming you with numbers. You can defend to lower their numbers, but I am a gamer and I am always on the offensive. Another thing worth mentioning is the sheer amount of territories Helmand holds. Helmand has more territories than all the other countries on the continent, by a considerable margin. Even if you conquer the country, some of the citizens will decide that you didn't do that and rebel against you. But the revolution is mostly made up of citizens, who don't have a good track record against me. The last country to conquer is the country of Zeth. This is a country of innovation in the magic field, and it reflects in their military. It is also a country of pro-slavery, which also reflects in their military. The country has less territories to conquer than Helmand, but they also have a competent military, which I don't like. The way how they attack is by having a mushy meat shield of slaves in the front while their mages fire at you from the back. It doesn't help that my only units resistant to magic attacks died about 15 turns back. They also have a cool move of nuking a city off the map and killing all the units I sent to them. I realize that I am making these guys sound brutal, but they aren't that bad. If you conquer the capital, you don't have to conquer most of the other regions, and by this point in the game you have a decent military that can see the death of a few of your generals. Pop quiz. It is 7 in the morning. I have 3 hours until the Spider-Man burger is at Burger King. What did I do for 3 hours? Save scum. The Monster Realm phase lets me talk about the bulk of my playthrough. Save scumming. Most games made in the 90s have their fair share of BS that comes along with them, and a prime example of this in Kichikuou rance is the RNG. The Oda Nubanuga guy that I mentioned can be a week-long fight or a month, and it all depends on RNG. This is extremely present in this phase as you have to deal with bosses known as Dark Lords. There are 9 Dark Lords in this phase, and each of them have a cool little quirk of being invincible. The only way to injure these bosses is with other Dark Lords or 2 specific units if you complete a side quest. In the best case scenario, you can have 7 units that can actually deal damage in this phase. Damage that is entirely RNG dependent. Normally what I described wouldn't be an issue, but at the start of the phase, 4 of these guys are trying to kill you whilst another is on a timer to, well, also kill you, and you just don't have enough manpower to defend them all. My strategy during this phase was using the unit Miki. I originally thought that Miki was a bugged unit. She has the least amount of troops out of any unit in the game and averages 0 damage, but for some reason, she has 30,000 health, which is more health than all the other units in the game combined, times by 100. I got even more confused when I deployed her once and her average of 0 damage went up to 30,000. Turns out that Miki is a suppressed Demon King that has a chance of dealing unreal amounts of damage every time she attacks. The key word in the sentence I just said is chance. This is only a 1 in 10 chance of happening, meaning that if she's used in a battle, she can either be the best unit in the game or the worst, with no in between. And if I did no damage, I had to restart an entire turn. Turns that would take on average 5 to 10 minutes to rerun. Naturally, this strategy was pretty boring, but it let me whittle down the bosses until I got to the final boss. He has the most amount of health out of any boss in the game and regenerates a good amount of it every turn. So naturally, I used this strategy again and beat him in 2 turns. Glitch time. Near the end of my playthrough, I started to see these Word documents that were making the game slightly inconvenient to access. Naturally, I deleted them. Turns out that these are save files, so I brought them back and just hid them. This caused me to make contact with aliens. Opening the game is something that I do frequently when I am playing the game. Playing the game in full screen is also in that same boat. Doing both of these at the same time would crash the game and sometimes my PC. The All Data tab is pretty useless, but it provides cool insight into your playthrough if you're into that. It also breaks the matrix if you're into that. With all that said and done, do I recommend this game? I don't know, man, just play whatever the fuck you want.